Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps.
Okay, welcome folks to another episode of Latte with a Lawyer. I'm your host, Jonathan Brickman, and this morning from Chicago, we have Brian LaCien from his law firm, Smith LaCien. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you, Jonathan.
There you go.
Welcome and thank you.
Welcome. We're welcome. I see you got green going there for St. Patty's Day. I know it's a big deal in Chicago.
It is a big deal, and they actually did it early this year. They celebrated it last weekend, and today is St. Pat. So the river was dyed, and we're back in business in Chicago as far as everything's open again. So St. Patrick's Day in Chicago is really the opening of the city. January and February are pretty quiet months. Some people say it's when baseball starts, but it's really St. Patrick's Day is when the city starts picking up. The weather's starting to turn.
Oh, is it starting to turn yet? No, I mentioned before we started the recording that I lived in Chicago for about 3.5 years. So I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, and I know exactly what you're saying. So the river was green and people are out and about now. Good.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and especially after a rough couple of years with COVID and everything else, it's really full swing at this point.
Excellent, good deal. So I see you got a coffee cup there. So Latte with a Lawyer. What's your morning beverage today? Might be different because it's St. Patty's Day.
No, I still got to do a few things. So
Right.
I'm a simple guy. Black coffee is just fine for me.
Okay,
whether
good.
it's at Starbucks or a gas station, I'm good.
Got it. Excellent. Gas station or Starbucks. That's quite a gap there,
Yeah. I just, as long as it's simple and as long as it's hot, I'm good.
All right. Well, that probably says a lot about your background. You're simple, no pretense about you. And so you grew up in Chicago, right?
Yeah, I was born in Chicago, and then I grew up in the southern suburbs, a small town called Flossmoor. Went to Homewood Flossmoor. Chicago, like many places, you can kind of figure things out by where that somebody went to high school, whether they went to Catholic school like Marist or St. Rita or Homewood Flossmoor, Hinsdale Central. People have ties to their high schools.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I remember that from living there. It's more important about the high school than it was where you went to university or grad school, right? High school is like really important.
Yeah. If you're from Chicago, you can kind of gauge people. And going back a generation when more people, the suburbs were smaller and the city was bigger, you could say the same thing whether I went to Fanger or the different city schools. Now it's hard to tell in the city because the city is, if you can go to any high school in the city, really. So
is that right now? It's open. You can go to any.
Yeah, it's open. There's some preference if you're closer to high school, and then there's a lot of different magnets. It's in the school. So the high school system in the city is changed a little bit. So you can't gauge, you can kind of tell somebody lived in the area if they went to certain high schools, but for other schools, you'd have no idea if they lived in the area or not, because it's kind of you got a lot of choices if you grew up in the city versus the burbs. It's all geographic based.
Got it. Okay, interesting. All right,
which matters for me because you pick a jury and you're trying to you're getting bits and pieces about people, so you're making decisions based on limited information, which is part of the process.
Oh, good. So that's a good segue into the type of law that you practice. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I represent plaintiffs in mainly personal injury matters. That would go everything from motor vehicle accidents all the way to commercial aircraft disasters where there's loss of lives, whether they be in the U.S., which hasn't happened in a while, or overseas, which is a little bit more common. Well, I don't want to say it's not common, but it's in recent years, most of these would be overseas. So I run the gambit. Probably more than 70% of my work is malpractice or product liability. So whether a professional deviated from the standard of care or was negligent, or a product failed from its intended use, and in those types of cases, the ones that are pursued typically involve serious or catastrophic injuries to people.
Okay. So give me an example of a case, one that you can talk about. I'm curious about that. Like product liability where it caused serious injuries. The one you can talk about?
Yeah. So an example would be a case that resolved a few years back. I represented a now deceased helicopter pilot who died on his last time flying a helicopter. He was shifting out of he was going to go, helicopter pilots are, you kind of have to work all over the world, where the work is, you go.
Yep.
And he had done it in Vietnam. He had done 10,000 hours plus. So this is heavily experienced for a helicopter. 10,000 hours is a lot, for pilots of aircraft. You can accumulate time because aircrafts travel. Helicopters being short
stints. Yeah.
10,000 hours is an very experienced pilot. And so, he was on his last day of work, just gassing up the helicopter, and there was a catastrophic failure of the bearing. That was where the allegations. The case went all the way through up to trial and resolved. So, it was interesting because there was foreign manufacturers involved. The case actually went to the Illinois Supreme Court. There was leave requested of the U.S. Supreme Court on the issue of personal jurisdiction about these bearings that were a company in Europe that was selling to a different company in Europe. And then the helicopters were being sold throughout the world. So those weren't the issues at trial, but those were all the issues we had to deal with. It resulted in one Illinois Supreme Court opinion, two appellate court opinions on the issue of jurisdiction. Meaning what you or I or a lawyer would call the stream of commerce, but all others would just say like how you send your products. And as time has gone on, that's become a bigger and bigger issue, especially in what I do with product liability, because you have, you could be a mom and pop in, New Mexico, and you decide to sell on Amazon or another large internet provider, and now you're selling products throughout the United States. And, when there's a failure, the issue is where can you sue someone? Now, I used a mom and pop example with Amazon, but, that would be the kind of rarity. It's usually large companies selling, tens of thousands, if not millions of products, who will contest jurisdiction by saying, well, I sell it to a distributor. And, even though there's, 50,000 tires I make on the road in Illinois, I don't directly sell to Illinois, so you can't sue me in Illinois.
Yeah, I get it. So in that case, who was the responsible party? It was a helicopter, but it was a part?
It was a part. So it resolved in total as to all defendants. So everyone participated. It's the names are confidential, but participated. So Illinois law is pretty consistent with laws across the country that if a manufacturer of a product has component parts, you're responsible for the larger product, but you're also responsible for the components. Now, the component part manufacturer will be responsible for whatever they made. Sure. So there's a little bit of overlap, which obviously, should be the case. So when it comes to machinery, that can come up from time to time.
Yeah. Well, that makes it interesting, right? You get some math there, right? To allocate the cost, right?
Yeah. So you allocate responsibility, and it's in what I do, it's also not just responsibility, it's discoverability, meaning if you have the larger manufacturer in a case and you don't have the component manufacturers, the larger manufacturer could rightfully say, well, we don't have data on testing. We don't have data on this or evaluations. We just buy the product, it's in a box. We make sure it conforms to the specs. And, all the design testing, And, the failure analysis that was done by whoever
Yeah.
sells it to us. So what do you want from us? So in pursuing these cases, it's not just about holding people responsible. It's also about proving the responsibility.
Right. Interesting. So these are complicated cases then. So how do you prepare for these? Like, what's your approach? This one didn't go to trial, but it seemed like you're
Yeah,
right
so
on the brink of going.
yeah, and I just use that as an example because
Sure.
it's an easy one to talk about, and people kind of have understand helicopters. Most of my product cases aren't helicopters.
Right.
You know, um, the for instance, we just were hired in a case involving a gun, so there was a failure. This isn't it was an unintentional shooting of a person.
Okay.
And it's currently in the evaluation phase, but like it runs the gambit. So whether it's very complicated machinery all the way to not saying a gun isn't complicated, but it's a lot simpler than a helicopter.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, you've got to approach it. You obviously have to have good experts. And you got to kind of approach it, where you can really drill down on the issues that matter in the case, because in this day and age, especially in product liability cases, defendants are capable of, well, they'll fight you tooth and nail for discovery, or on the flip side, they'll just do document dumps like, hey, you want emails, yeah, here's 30,000 emails, here's 2 million documents, and which is just can overwhelm you. And and you got to have and we have processes in place so we can kind of evaluate large data files.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you have all these data mining tools.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But can kind of go both ways. It used to be at the and this is interesting because technology, the very start of my career, I started in 03, graduated in 02 and started in 03. I had like the tail end of the warehouse box review, where you'd go to, documents would be shipped to a warehouse. You'd be manually going through them as documents as a lawyer. That was like, I had done that a few times very early in my career. Had to do it. I was involved in a case with several law firms where there was documents going back to the 80s. So it had to be done more recently on a case, but that's a limited exception. It had been like 10, 12 years. Most times it's about search terms and the algorithms that you're going to use to, mine the data. And, especially in, the difference between product liability and malpractice. Not sure which way you want me to segue. So is that malpractice, the issues can be very complex involving medical care.
Right.
But typically you have, a fairly established set of records. It's the medical records.
Sure.
Now, even that has become more complex because there is audit data that are now required by the government for various reasons. But like medical records are all electronic and they have to be kept and maintained. And if there's changes, the changes have to be maintained. So it's not just simply the paper chart anymore. But even then, you just have a set number of records. But in product liability, you end up in these situations where, it used to be a small number of documents. Now the electronic age, one email can turn into 100 emails depending on who's on the chain and what's full. And it just creates this cumbersome, it creates a lot of discovery. And what ultimately happens when you get close to trial, you might have a long exhibit list, but really you have, 6 to 10 key documents to prove your case. But you got to get there, and you're getting 1 million documents. You got to get down to 6 to 10. It could be 20, but like most cases come down to just a few documents to prove your case. And, that's all part of the process of, making sure you get it. And then, making sure you, can find the documents you need to prove.
Yeah. So going from the old, the warehouse days to e-discovery, I mean, that's shortened the process tremendously, right? Like, how long does it take you to sort of narrow down to those 6 to 10 documents that you need?
Oh, it can take, it still takes, because of, there was, I guess it was more labor intensive in the old system, which I can't say more than 2 or 3 years, because, I'm in 05, 06, things were always quickly already going electronic. But that was more labor intensive. But the proliferation of electronic data that just created huge data sets.
Oh yeah.
And so, even then, when you're running searches that you're trying to, you're running algorithms, you're running searches. There's certain ways that you could even, load up into systems what you believe to be relevant documents, and then the system itself tries to filter through. And then ultimately, you get down to sets that are still sometimes in the 100,000 or more, sometimes even approaching 5, where those have to be manually reviewed. Because you can't do it all. Technology can get you there, but it can get you partially there. It's not going to get you the whole way.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So still, yeah. What do you use? What's your platform?
There's a few different ones. It's
Yeah.
usually vendor based.
Okay.
So there's a few different programs that are available. They all basically are relatively the same. Some people favor one or the other, but they all are, they're a little bit, if we all have Outlook, they're all I guess, a little bit more user friendly than Outlook, and they all have a beefed up ability to, search for documents, search for, authors of documents, segue time periods.
Yeah.
And, it's changed the practice of law as far as how much computer work you do, made things easier. It's just it's made it greatly easier to review materials. But then on the backside, the amount of materials available to review is exponentially grown.
Yeah, that's increased. Yeah, so much. I mean, yeah.
Old cases or not even old cases, meaning cases that went back to the 90s or even sometimes the 80s as far as the development of a product, you still see the old inter-office memos. And it was like one memo and there was just people's names on top. And they didn't keep 7 versions of it, even though there were 7 names. They kept 1.
Right.
And then people would sign it sometimes at the top, oh yeah, I looked at it, because they want to verify you actually looked at this document. So then preserve, a memo with 7 signatures, versus now it's emailed to 14 people. So then that multiplies it 14 times. It could be forwarded to other. There could be conversations. So with different people. So then you have this exponential growth of electronic information.
Yeah, lots of data you got to come through for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. So just to sort of back it up a little bit here, just tell, how'd you get started? What was the path to become a lawyer? Why'd you become a lawyer? I know you went to Iowa undergrad, take us through that journey.
Yeah. So, I never, I can't remember ever wanting to do anything else with my life. I know I sound odd, what 7-year-old wants to be a lawyer. I was the son of a judge, which was interesting. And I mean, he wasn't someone who ever brought his work home. I have 3 siblings. None of them are lawyers, but he.
Well, you must be the oldest then.
I am the youngest.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm an oops. So I have my next closest sibling is 9 years older than me, and I'm a what are you? You're pregnant. So one of those, and so I think my dad loved his job, and he but wasn't someone who ever pushed a career. Wasn't someone. I don't think he actually liked being a lawyer as much as I do, to be honest. And then that might be part of the reason he spent the second half of his career, or most of his career, on the bench rather than practicing law. And he was a criminal judge, so totally different aspect than what I do.
Yeah.
And but I always just liked that. I mean, I in a way that a child could understand what their father did for a living to some extent. I was 4 when he went on the bench, and I kind of did. I understood that even my dad as a judge, like the respect for like a lawyer. You are a professional. You are representing people. You have certain things that you have to live up to because of the, I guess, confidence or trust people put in you. So, and then as far as the aspects of trial work, didn't always know I wanted to be a trial lawyer. There's lots of lawyers do different things.
Sure.
But just the, the ability to, it's the one aspect of government. I sound like a lawyer who represents plaintiffs in saying this, but it's absolutely true. The one aspect of the branch of government where, while I can't say it's 1,000% true, but you have individuals in this country have the best chance at being on equal footing. It's very difficult in, the legislative branch for an individual to be on equal footing with a large corporation.
Right.
But in a court of law, at least how it's set up, that a plaintiff has a chance, or even a defendant, if it's an individual defendant, has the opportunity to be on an equal footing with a defendant, where 12 regular folks decide whatever the dispute is. And so, I mean, that just appealed to me, where you're, trying to, achieve, justice for people that have been harmed, that oftentimes for our clients, it's, devastating harm, where, you're worried, they're worried about their ability to live, their ability to, pay the mortgage, their ability to receive medical care in the future. All of those things are the issues that we're resolving due to the negligence of others.
Yeah. And you like fighting for that. Got it. So do you get in the courtroom a lot? I mean, you said you're a trial lawyer, but does that mean you actually get in front of the jury?
Yeah. So, as much as you can, but at the same time, due to the complexity of the cases, most cases do resolve outside of court. And then obviously COVID really altered the practice of law, and it used to be hearings every day in court going through issues, and now it's shifted to kind of how we're talking now. There's a lot of Zoom, there's a lot of email, things like that.
Yeah. So just like the proliferation of documents, because everybody's a publisher these days, are there more and more suits, trial, litigation than before too? I mean, is that increased as well?
Yeah, that's
like per capita, I guess, like, so there's some metric.
Yeah, no, I see where you're going.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a lawyer answer. It depends on what the metrics you use to measure that.
Yeah.
So, like, let me just explain what I mean. So during COVID, there was less people on the roads.
Right.
And that would motor vehicle accidents, that would decrease the motor vehicle accidents.
Yep.
In Illinois, there's a lot of, not a lot. In Illinois, there's litigation stemming from construction injuries. There's a lot of large, Chicago's a big city. There's a lot of large projects.
Yep.
And people are unfortunately injured, sometimes due to the negligence of others. And so if you think about that context of litigation, that depends on economics. So, for instance, if there is a recession or a downturn in construction, inherently following that, there may be less construction type cases just because less people are working, less people are getting hurt.
Sure.
Even if you apply that to the larger society and you look at pharmaceutical litigation, for instance, this isn't 100% true, but, and I don't mean to get political, but certain parties are more interested in lax regulation than the other party.
Correct.
All things being equal.
Right.
And when you have a regulatory environment that's much more lax, you end up some years after that, products coming onto the market that maybe with greater regulation, defects or problems would have been found. But because of a lack of regulation, they're on the market. And you see
No, I get all those kind of macro things that influence, but let's hold things constant. I'm just wondering, is like society more litigious than it was? What do you think?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I don't think so. In some ways, what I do is constantly under attack.
Yeah.
Not me personally, but as people who represent individuals. So I think there's segments of society who are, less trusting than of lawyers than it used to be. I mean, going back 200 years, one of the most famous presidents, Abraham Lincoln, he did medical malpractice cases. And, we had John Edwards, who did run for president a few years back, but like by and large, you could see how in certain segments of society that if someone who in their history was a medical malpractice lawyer ran for president, how they might be portrayed politically versus, nearly 200 years ago, a president of the United States he did other things, Abraham Lincoln, but he was involved in malpractice cases.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. He represented a lot of railroads. That would make sense. That was really going on back then.
Right.
But, and there was a lot fewer lawyers, obviously medicine was a little different then too. So proving a malpractice case, they're not far off from when they bleed you, they didn't do it then, but like, it wasn't that long before that
right.
You're sick, let me bleed you.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Boy, the world has changed, and a relatively short amount of time too, right? Think about it.
A relatively short amount of time. And you see it in the practice of law, because in what I do, genetics are becoming more and more relevant, because the issue of causation, certain conditions that people are saying, well, genetic, you're predisposed, or you have certain.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's really, and what they know is, they know obviously every year they're discovering more and more. It's amazing, but like there's so much they don't know in that area. So it's it's emerging, I would say, as far as.
So you're leaning heavily, like medical malpractice, you're leaning heavily on experts, right? As part of your case preparation.
Yeah. No, in Illinois, most states, you have to have an expert in that type of case. Product liability, you typically have experts.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically I could see where you wouldn't, but like, I don't think I've ever pursued a product liability case without an expert.
Yeah.
And so in more complex cases, you'd have in Illinois, but in Illinois, there is a requirement that if you're going to sue a medical provider, you have to have a medical provider as an expert.
Yeah.
And so that's a requirement. So yeah, in a way you are leaning, but like as a lawyer, you got to know your case. And, I think one of the topics we're going to talk about is, what traits do you need to be a great lawyer? And I guess this is a segue of just, preparation is the most important thing, whether you're, obviously experience matters, skill set matters, but in the practice of law, preparation is the most important thing.
Mm.
You know, you can't change whether someone has more experience than you. In some ways, I mean, nuance, you can, skill set is so subjective, but you could say, well, someone's a great talker, much better talker than some other lawyer, or, in the other words. But like preparation is something as a lawyer, you just, especially on these cases that, are just so important. And
But isn't everybody prepping? I mean, that's what I have a hard time on. I mean, everybody's going into this knowing I got to be prepared, right? So
yeah,
is there a real noticeable gap between attorneys on cases?
there can be.
There
There
can
can,
be,
but
okay.
not always. I mean, sometimes you have on the other side, ferocious defense that are
Yeah.
prepared, and but I just, you can never let someone outwork you.
Okay. So you're both working hard and you're both prepared, equally prepared, right? So who wins?
Who wins?
Yeah. So how do you win? You know what I mean? So both sides are super prepared. They've worked their butts off. They know the
Well,
case.
I mean, that I think skill set, preparation, the strength of your case, frankly, each
Okay.
side,
Yeah.
and that does matter. So, it just, but a lack of preparation can hurt you, even with strong facts and whatever. And so you just you want to be in the room to make sure that there's not somebody on the other side of the table that knows more than you do.
Yeah.
And for a plaintiff lawyer, I'm not talking about myself, just
yeah.
We're oftentimes taking depositions of medical doctors, of representatives of corporations, and the lawyers that represent those doctors or represent those corporations, they're the ones who have access to the information. They're the ones who can pick up the phone and call the client and say, hey, this document says blank, blank, blank. What does this mean? And what's the next step? Someone who represents a plaintiff, we don't have an in-house, client who's an expert in a subject matter, or in a product liability. We can't call the engineer on the project and say, explain these schematics to me. Now I can depose the engineer, but at the same time, that engineer is typically defending the, whatever he or she did.
Sure.
So, that is, challenging, for plaintiff lawyers generally. And when you're, working on medical malpractice, product liability cases, you gotta know as much as they do.
Right.
And these are people that have, I've been working, I'm an engineer. I've been working on brakes for 25 years.
So let me ask you. So again, the facts are the facts, but I mean, do you think the jury gets it right most of the time?
I think 12 people do get it right.
You do.
It's the greatest system in the world. Yeah. Now I think,
in the state of Illinois, you need what, 9 out of 12? You need
you need unanimous.
Unanimous.
Illinois is a unanimous state, so you got to prove your case to 12 people. So I think that are there cases that I've lost? Sure. And but at the same time, is the jury system, this is often overused and said too much, but it's the greatest system out there to resolve disputes. You get 12 people together, they hear the evidence, and they decide the case. And so I think juries tend to get it right.
Yeah.
Because it's 12 people that might spend a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 or 4, hearing evidence and deciding dispute. And it's just amazing, kind of segueing a little bit, of how oftentimes some people kind of have preconceived notions, like time away from my family, time away from my job, concerns like that. But I've never talked to a juror afterwards that did not appreciate the experience of being on a jury. And just, I'm not saying they'd want to do it forever, but at the same time are at least glad that they experienced something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I think people understand how important that is and how rare that is, because in most countries it does not exist. It may exist for criminal, but not so much for civil.
Right. I had a chance to be on a panel a couple of months ago in West Palm Beach. They didn't select me. I did want to be part of it, though.
It's hard to get selected as a lawyer.
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not a lawyer. I just talked to a lot of lawyers, so I'm not a lawyer. But I mean, I probably would have been struck anyway because of, you know, my relationship to lawyers. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's a great honor and you know, a worthwhile experience to go through if you get to do that. So I agree.
Yeah, and one that I'm never going to get picked for.
Yeah, you're never right. You'll never get paid for it.
Oh, never.
Yeah, but you get to be on the other side. So, so just to, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but just sort of final words you want to leave about your firm and the best way to connect if they want to learn more about you.
Oh, yeah, no, Jonathan, thank you for doing this. And again, I work at Smith LaCien. You can find us at smithlacien.com, and we're here in Chicago. But thank you for doing this. Very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. No, my pleasure. So again, for everybody, Brian LaCien, Smith LaCien, and this is sponsored by EmotionTrac, which is a legal tech platform that helps guys like you, litigators, prepare for mediation and trials with our Insights platform. Thanks a lot, Brian. Really good stuff.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You bet.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.